What if the deepest wounds don't come from enemies, but from the people who share your last name? They say blood is thicker than water, but sometimes blood carries the heaviest weight, because the hurt that comes from family cuts deeper than any betrayal from a stranger. A stranger's lies might wound, but a sibling's betrayal, that can shatter your soul. Because they weren't supposed to be the ones to hurt you. They were supposed to protect you, stand beside you, pray with you. When the betrayal comes from someone who shared your childhood memories, your mother's table, your late-night tears, that wound doesn't just sting. It sinks. It seeps into your bones. It makes you question not just them, but yourself. Let me tell you a truth the world might not want to hear. Just because someone shares your DNA doesn't mean they're entitled to mistreat you. Yes, the Bible calls us to forgive 70 times 7, but it never tells us to stand still while someone repeatedly drives the same knife deeper into our soul. Forgiveness is not permission, it's release. It's for your heart, your healing. But it doesn't require you to keep walking back into a storm just to prove you're strong. Some siblings will take your silence as weakness, your kindness as permission. You've defended them, covered for them, made excuses for their cruelty, believing that your loyalty would one day be honored. But instead, they twist your words, exploit your trust, and betray your love. All with a smile, because they think you'll always stay. They confuse your patience with powerlessness. And when you finally draw a boundary, when you finally stop bleeding for them in silence, they label you the problem. Suddenly, you're the one who changed. But no, you didn't change. You just got tired of being broken by someone who never intended to build with you. Repeated disrespect, especially from a sibling, is not love. It's control wrapped in obligation. And it doesn't matter if you grew up at the same table. If they mock your beliefs, tear down your dreams, or trample over your boundaries again and again, that's not family. That's a pattern, and patterns must be broken, not excused. It's okay to step away. It's okay to protect your peace. You can love someone and still love yourself enough to stop letting them harm you. You can forgive them and still create distance. That doesn't make you cold. It makes you clear. You're not bitter. You're just done bleeding quietly. You're not heartless. You're healing. Healing sometimes means letting go, not with anger or revenge, but with wisdom and peace. Because there are some betrayals that must be forgiven privately, but remembered wisely. Not to hold a grudge, but to guard your soul. Remember this. Family was meant to be your safe place, not a battleground. They were meant to lift you, not drag you into guilt, shame, or silence. If your sibling keeps choosing pride over peace and control over care, then let me assure you, you are not the problem. You're the one who finally opened your eyes. And hear this loud and clear. You are not obligated to keep absorbing betrayal just to keep the family picture neat and pretty. The truth is, God is not impressed by appearances. He is moved by alignment. He doesn't prioritize how many blood does you maintain, but how many soul ties you guard with truth and peace. You are responsible for what you allow in your spirit. You are the gatekeeper of your peace. You are not called to keep chaos close just because it shares your last name. You're not dishonoring God by walking away from dysfunction. You're honoring the spirit within you by choosing wisdom. Yes, God can restore anything. He is the God of reconciliation. But restoration always begins with honesty. And honesty means looking at the weight you've been carrying and admitting, this hasn't been mutual. This relationship hasn't been safe. Sometimes love doesn't mean holding on tighter. It means letting go sooner. It means releasing someone to God while protecting your soul. I'm not saying stop loving them. I'm saying love them differently. Love them with boundaries. Love them with your eyes wide open, not with blind loyalty. Love them in a way that honors your healing, not their control. Because when someone keeps crossing the line and demands that you accept it because we're family, they're not asking for forgiveness. They're asking for permission to keep hurting you. Let today be the day you reclaim your peace. Let this be the moment you stop confusing being loyal with being walked over. God never called you to be a doormat. He called you to walk in dignity, in strength, in truth. You were never created to carry silent suffering. That's not your portion. You were made for freedom, for joy, for connection that reflects heaven, not guilt trips, not emotional manipulation, disguised as family honor. If you've been haunted by guilt, wondering, am I wrong for stepping away? Let me say this as clearly as I can. You are not wrong. You're not heartless. You're finally healing. You're finally choosing yourself the way God chooses you, fully, without condition. There's a kind of betrayal that wears a smile. It claps when you win, but you can feel the hollowness behind the applause. It shows up at your table, but its heart is bitter, cold, distant. And this betrayal doesn't always come from strangers. Sometimes it comes from your own sibling, the one who shared your home, your history, your hopes. They should have been your biggest supporter. But behind closed doors, they weren't praying for your success. They were quietly hoping for your stumble. Not because you did anything wrong, but because they couldn't handle the light God placed on your life. Jealousy is quiet like that. It doesn't shout. It whispers in the dark. It doesn't attack. It undermines. It smiles in your face while measuring your blessings like a rival keeping score. And when that measuring falls short, they don't rejoice with you, they resent you. A jealous sibling may not always confess their envy, but they'll show you. In the way they minimize your progress, in the way they mock your dreams, in the way they speak death over your goals, disguised as jokes, as sarcasm, as just being real. But make no mistake, that's not love. That's sabotage. That's betrayal camouflaged as closeness. God didn't bless you just to let someone close to you weaponize that blessing against you. Your breakthrough, your growth, your purpose, it's not a threat. But to the one consumed by envy, your rise feels like their fall. And rather than run their own race, they try to slow yours down. Instead of building with you, they quietly dismantle your joy from the shadows, and they'll do it all with a straight face, with a shrug, with a "don't be so sensitive." But you feel it, don't you? You felt it for years, that uneasy ache in your spirit, the heaviness after every conversation. Betrayal echoes in silence. It lingers long after the moment has passed. You don't always have proof, but you have peace. And when that peace disappears in someone's presence, pay attention. Maybe you've tried to ignore it. Maybe you've rationalized it, told yourself they're just stressed or wounded or going through something. You've made excuses. You've offered grace. But let me speak plainly to your heart. When someone deliberately sows doubt into your calling, when they twist your truth, isolate you from others, or seek to sabotage what God has placed in you, that is not someone who's struggling. That is someone who's made a choice. They're not just struggling, they're sabotaging. And that, my friend, is betrayal in its most intimate form. You do not have to forgive into closeness. Yes, forgiveness is powerful. Yes, it frees your heart from bitterness. But forgiveness doesn't mean you have to keep walking beside someone who's secretly praying for your downfall. You are not required to link arms with the one who quietly hopes you fail. And of course, there will always be voices whispering, but they're your sibling. You're supposed to stick together. And yes, in a perfect world, that's the dream. That's what we all long for, to rise together, to celebrate one another, to hold each other up when life gets heavy. But not at the cost of your peace. Not at the cost of your mental and emotional well-being. Not at the cost of the purpose God placed in your soul. What good is walking together if one hand is held in public while the other hand is twisting a knife in secret? What good is smiling? For the family photo when you have to fight tears in your room later because every conversation with them leaves you wounded. God didn't call you to keep the peace for appearances. He called you to live in truth. And sometimes that truth uncovers betrayal buried deep beneath bloodlines. The truth is, there are people, even siblings, who can't handle your light. Your growth shines too brightly, and it reflects their unhealed places. But instead of confronting their own pain, they aim to dim yours. Let me say it plain, you don't owe anyone your light. You don't have to make yourself small so someone else can feel secure. You don't have to apologize for the way God has favored you. You don't have to hide your blessings just because they make someone uncomfortable. If your sibling can't clap when you win, that's not a reflection of your pride. It's a reflection of their heart. And I know that stings, because you didn't want rivalry, you wanted relationship, you didn't want competition, you wanted connection, you wanted to grow together, to laugh together, to share life, not keep your guard up like you're in enemy territory. But when the ones you love treat your success like a threat, when your elevation feels like a battleground instead of a celebration, you are not called to fix that alone. You can pray, you can forgive, you can extend grace, but you are not responsible to carry someone else's jealousy or their unwillingness to heal, because sabotage, even when it's dressed up as love, is still sabotage. Jealousy, even when it speaks with soft concern, is still a seed of destruction, waiting to bloom. So today, walk boldly in the truth of who you are. Stop dimming your light because someone else can't handle its brilliance. Stop explaining your joy, shrinking your smile, editing your testimony to make someone else feel comfortable. God has brought you too far. He's broken too many chains. He's opened too many doors for you to walk around apologizing for the blessing on your life. If the people who say they love you can't cheer for you without conditions, then they were never truly in your corner. Let them wrestle with their reflection. Let them face the envy they carry. That's not your job. Your job is to keep rising, keep building, keep shining. And don't you dare let the silent bitterness of a sibling rob you of the destiny God has placed before you. There's a sacred place in every heart, a vault where we place our most fragile pieces. The fears we dare not speak aloud, the pain we tuck behind practiced smiles, the memories that still echo in the quiet hours. And when it comes to siblings, we believe, often without question, that they'll guard that sacred space, that they'll protect our stories like treasures, not twist them into weapons. That they'll listen, not just hear. That they'll cradle our vulnerability, not exploit it. But when a sibling betrays that trust, when they take your deepest confessions and use them as ammunition, that's not just betrayal. That's a violation of the soul. You didn't open up because you were weak. You opened up because you believed they would handle your pain with care. You believed their love was safe. You let them into the softest parts of your spirit, not because you needed fixing, but because you needed a friend. Maybe it was the time you opened up about your anxiety. Maybe it was the moment you dared to speak about the cracks in your marriage. Or maybe it was when guilt wrapped around your soul like a vice, and you confessed that one secret sin, just hoping for some understanding. And in that moment they nodded. They seemed to get it. You thought they saw you. But later, maybe during an argument, maybe through gossip, maybe behind your back, they took that vulnerable piece of you and used it as a weapon. There's nothing more devastating than realizing the person who once held your story only held it so they could throw it at you later. And not always in dramatic explosions. Sometimes it's quiet, it's subtle. They whisper your secret to just one person. They chuckle about your past in a room full of people, pretending it's light-hearted. They toss out a phrase like, "You know what she's really like," as if your pain is just another piece of gossip to pass around. That's not love. That's not protection. That's not family. That's betrayal dressed in familiar clothing. And hear me clearly, you do not owe anyone forgiveness that leaves you bleeding again. Forgiveness is not supposed to leave your soul wide open to repeated injury. When someone uses your pain as ammunition, that tells you everything you need to know about where their heart really stands. This isn't just immaturity, it's malice. It's a deliberate decision to dismantle trust. Even if they come back with a half-hearted, "I didn't mean it," the damage is still there. The crack has formed. the closeness begins to fade. The silence between you becomes a canyon, and you begin to guard your words, not out of spite but out of wisdom, because you've learned. You've learned that not everyone who says I love you knows how to hold your heart with care. You've learned that some people will cradle your secrets until it suits them to drop them at your feet. Maybe you've tried to brush it off. You've told yourself that's just how they are. You've tried to keep the peace, but deep inside you felt the shift. You felt the weight of grief, not just the loss of trust, but the death of the version of you that once believed in their loyalty. That wound, it's real. It's holy in its teaching, because betrayal like this teaches you something sacred. Not everyone close to you can be trusted with the deepest parts of you. And not every apology deserves a return to the same level of intimacy. You see, some people think forgiveness equals access. They assume that once you've said, I forgive you, they're welcome to sit at your table again, laugh like nothing happened, carry on like the crack never formed. But true wisdom says otherwise. True wisdom says, yes, I forgive you. But, no, I cannot trust you like I did before. That isn't hate. That isn't punishment. That's protection. That's the kind of discernment God gives you, not to withhold love, but to guard what's sacred. Don't let guilt silence your healing. Don't let shame convince you that you were wrong to trust. You weren't. You were right to love. You were right to hope. You were right to open up. What they did was wrong, but your heart was pure. And don't let their failure stop you from ever opening again. Just because they didn't value your vulnerability doesn't mean it wasn't valuable. It means you need to be more selective, more discerning about who you let into those sacred places. Your openness is still a gift. You just need to give it to someone who knows how to treasure it, not exploit it. Someone who shows, not just says, that they will cover your wounds instead of exposing them. And I know what someone out there is thinking, but it's my sibling. Shouldn't I give them another chance? Only if the fruit has changed. Only if there's repentance, not just apology. Only if their transformation is real, not rehearsed. Otherwise, my friend, what you're doing is walking barefoot into broken glass, hoping this time it won't cut you. And that's not faith. That's self-inflicted pain. That's confusion dressed up as loyalty. God wants you healed, not stuck in cycles that reopen your wounds over and over. So if you've been carrying the heavy weight of betrayal from someone you trusted, someone you loved, hear this clearly. It's not your fault. And no, you don't have to pretend it never happened just to protect the image of family. If a sibling has used your pain as a weapon against you, you have every right, every God-given right, to set a boundary. You can say, I still love you, but you no longer have access to the softest parts of me. And that, my friend, is not cruelty. That's courage. That, my friend, is clarity. And sometimes clarity is the painful but necessary first step toward true healing. Because not all betrayals roar like thunder or explode in a single, devastating moment. Some of them arrive quietly, like a slow leak, like a drip that eventually floods your spirit. These betrayals don't shout, they whisper, and it's not always in what they say. It's in what they refuse to say, not in what they do, but in what they refuse to do. I'm talking about the silence. The kind of silence that echoes louder than any insult ever could. When your siblings, the very ones who were supposed to be your defenders, your protectors, your family, stand by and say nothing while others tear you down. They hear the lies. They witness the rejection. They watch as others twist your name, misunderstand your motives, misjudge your heart, and they stay still. They don't speak. They don't move. They don't protect. And that kind of silence, it cuts deeper than words, because when the world is pointing fingers at you, when you're being dragged through mud you didn't deserve, you don't just need someone to not hurt you, you need someone to fight. For you, that's what love looks like. That's what loyalty means. Not just showing up when it's easy, but stepping in when the fire gets hot. And yet, how many hearts have shattered because a brother, a sister, didn't throw the stone, but didn't stop it either? They chose neutrality, but neutrality, in the face of injustice, is not innocence. It's quiet agreement dressed up in comfort. I don't want to get involved, they say. It's not my place, they shrug. But when the one being attacked is your own blood, your own sibling, that silence speaks volumes. That silence says, their pain doesn't inconvenience me enough to act. And I want you to pause for a second and think, how many times have you been hurt, judged, cornered, or humiliated, and you turned, just hoping to see your sibling stand up for you, just hoping for a hand, a word, a gesture that said, I've got your back. But instead they stood at a distance. They weren't the ones attacking, but they also weren't protecting. They weren't the enemy, but they weren't an ally either. And that kind of absence? It doesn't leave bruises on the skin. It leaves bruises on the soul. And the betrayal of silence? It's not always loud. Sometimes it shows up in the quiet spaces, in the moments when you needed encouragement, and they stayed silent. When you doubted yourself, and they said nothing to lift you. When others devalued you, and they just sat there, letting it happen. And that can feel like abandonment wrapped in apathy. It teaches you something, doesn't it? It teaches you to hide your pain, to suppress your needs, to lower your expectations. Because when silence becomes the pattern, you begin to believe that you must survive alone. You stop waiting for anyone to stand up for you, because history taught you not to, and so you grow strong. Not because they lifted you, but because they left you. You learn resilience, not because they were your shield, but because they were absent when you needed armor. And yes, that strength is something to be proud of, but don't mistake it for healing, because buried underneath that strength is a quiet grief. A grief that says, I never wanted to be this independent. I just had to be. And maybe someone needs to hear this today. You're not wrong for feeling that pain. You're not weak for craving support. You're not selfish for wishing they had stood up when it mattered most. You were never meant to walk through the fire alone. But when others abandoned you in your time of need, when even your sibling turned away, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't because you weren't worth defending. It was because they lacked the courage to stand beside you. Let me tell you something that might set your soul free. Their silence was never about your value. It was always about their fear, their desire for comfort, their inability to face conflict. And that's not your burden to carry. You did nothing wrong by expecting protection. You weren't naive for hoping they'd show up. You were right to believe that family should be more than just a title. Family should be presence. Family should be strength. Family should be a voice that echoes with yours, not disappears into the background. And from now on, may you no longer measure love by blood alone. May you look for voices that speak up, hands that reach out, and hearts that stand firm in truth, even when it's hard. Because real family doesn't flinch when you fall. They rise with you, and let me reassure you once more, you are not bitter for being hurt by their silence. You are not wrong for carrying the weight of disappointment from the moments they didn't show up. That pain is real. That letdown is valid. And while your healing doesn't require resentment, it also doesn't demand denial. You don't need to bury the truth just to keep the peace, because forgiveness isn't fantasy. It's not pretending they defended you when they didn't. It's not rewriting the memory to make it easier to digest. No, sometimes real forgiveness starts with honesty. Honesty with yourself. Admitting they could have done more. Admitting they should have done more. That they saw what happened and chose to stay silent. That their silence was a choice. And I know some people will say, maybe they just didn't know what to say. But let's be clear, silence in the face of injustice is not confusion. It's complicity. It's not the absence of words. It's the absence of courage. And when silence protects the wrong voices, it automatically betrays the right ones. You don't need to shout. You don't need to wage a war to stand in truth. You can simply say, "This isn't okay." You can say, "That's my family. That's someone I love." You don't get to speak about them like that. You can choose not to laugh at the cruel jokes. You can walk away from the gossip. You can be the one who refuses to join the crowd. Throwing stones, because love defends, even when it's uncomfortable. Love covers, even when it's not convenient. So if you've been the one wounded by silence, if you've watched your own family members stand idly by while the world tried to break you, I want you to hear this with your whole heart. Your worth is not determined by who stood with you. Your value is not diminished by who failed to defend it. God saw it all, every word they never said, every time they looked away, every moment you stood alone, aching for a voice that never came. He heard you, and he's still standing by you, even when they wouldn't. Let that be your peace. Let that be your anchor. Because when a sibling stays silent while you're under attack, they've already made their choice. And sometimes the betrayal that stings the most isn't from what they did. It's from what they refused to do. But there's another betrayal that often slips in quietly. One that hides behind politeness, behind fake smiles, behind lukewarm congratulations. It's the betrayal of success, when the people who should be clapping for you are secretly wishing you'd fall. It's when God begins opening doors. When your hard work finally bears fruit. When your purpose starts unfolding and your light begins to shine and the people closest to you fall silent. Not because you hurt them, but because your elevation stirred their insecurity, your glow triggered their shadows, your progress disrupted their comfort. They don't say, "I'm proud of you," they just say, "Nothing." Or worse, they throw shade, sarcastic comments, passive remarks, a cold shoulder wrapped in fake smiles, and little by little you begin to notice it. They stop asking how you're doing, not because they're busy, but because they can't stand hearing how well you're doing. They stop showing up, or they only show up to minimize what God is magnifying in your life. They'll say, "You've changed." But no, you didn't change to hurt them. You changed because you grew. You stepped into your calling. You matured. You started shining in the light God placed over your life. And instead of being inspired by that, they became uncomfortable. They let jealousy take root. They let insecurity speak louder than love, and that wedge, that cold distance. It's not your fault. You didn't just want success. You wanted shared joy. You wanted to celebrate with them. You wanted their pride, to rise with your progress. But now, standing on your mountaintop, you're alone. And that loneliness, it cuts deeper than most people know. Because the truth is, you didn't just want the win. You wanted their hand in the victory. And when they're absent, when they avoid your light because it casts shadows on their wounds, that's not your burden to fix. That's not your fault to carry. So please don't shrink to keep them comfortable. Don't dim your light to make others feel secure. Don't apologize for walking in your purpose. God elevated you for a reason, and their reaction reveals more about them than it does about you. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. Just keep walking, keep shining, and let those who truly love you find the courage to stand beside you, not only when you're down, but especially when you're rising. And when jealousy finds its way into a sibling's heart, something sacred begins to slip away. That bond you once believed was unbreakable starts to fracture. What once felt like admiration turns into silent judgment. What once was unity becomes an unspoken rivalry. Suddenly, you're not just chasing your dreams anymore. You're also shielding your heart from the coldness of someone who once stood beside you. And here's the uncomfortable truth that many people struggle to say out loud. Sometimes the deepest wounds come from the people who know your middle name. Sometimes your biggest critics live under your roof or just down the street. Sometimes the sabotage doesn't come from strangers, but from the same lips that used to say, "I've got your back." It's heartbreaking, it's confusing, because You didn't expect them to be threatened by your blessings. You expected them to be proud, but what you find instead is distance, silence, cold glances and colder conversations. And all because God chose to bless you in a way they didn't anticipate. But hear this, it is not your fault. It is not your responsibility to diminish your purpose so someone else can feel comfortable standing still. You were not designed to fold your wings to fit someone else's expectations. You were not created to downplay the anointing God placed on your life just to preserve someone else's ego. God's favor is not a family vote. It's not conditional. And it's certainly not something you need to apologize for, because if your siblings' love couldn't withstand your breakthrough, then it wasn't rooted in love at all. Real love doesn't wilt when the light shines on someone else. It blooms. Real love says, I'm happy for you, even while I'm still waiting on my own. Real love doesn't compete, it completes. It doesn't shrink in envy, it rises in celebration. But when a sibling can't clap when you win, when they vanish in the moments they should be the loudest cheering you on, that reveals more about the condition of their heart than about your journey. And maybe you've felt the guilt creep in. Maybe you've thought, am I doing too much? Or should I be quieter about what God is doing in my life? Maybe you've even tried to make yourself smaller so the room wouldn't feel so tense. But I need you to hear this with everything inside you. Never dim the flame God has lit in you because someone else refuses to light their own. Never downplay your destiny just to soothe someone else's insecurity. You are not responsible for how they react to your elevation. Your only responsibility is to carry your blessing with humility, to walk in grace, and to stay faithful to the purpose God has given you. I don't say this to stir up bitterness. I say this so you can breathe again, so you can live again. If you've been betrayed by a sibling who couldn't handle your success, know this, it's not your fault. You don't have to explain your progress. You don't have to keep proving that you deserve your position. You can grieve the closeness you once had and still choose to keep rising, because peace doesn't always look like everyone walking beside you. It sometimes looks like walking alone, unbothered, unashamed, unburdened. You can still love them. You can still pray for them, but don't let their silence mute your song. Don't let their distance confuse your direction. God didn't lift you to impress them. He lifted you to fulfill purpose. And those who truly love you, the real ones, they may not understand every detail, but they'll celebrate with you anyway. Let your life be your testimony. Let your growth be your offering. And if your siblings can't clap, keep walking. Heaven is already standing. And remember this too, some betrayals don't come with harsh words or physical wounds. They come with access. It begins when you trust too deeply, when you let someone too close, when you open your home, your heart, your life, believing they'd protect what matters most, believing blood meant loyalty, believing family meant safety. But then one day you turn around and realize that the very person you trusted has taken what was sacred and used it as a weapon. That betrayal doesn't explode. It sinks in, slowly, deeply, painfully. You offered help and they turned it into leverage. You welcomed them to your table and they used it to gather gossip. You shared your fears, your failures, your rawest truths, and instead of guarding your soul, they exposed it, not by accident, but with intention. And that cut, that's the kind that doesn't just hurt, it changes you. Sometimes the betrayal isn't loud, it's quiet, cold, and calculated. It comes not from enemies, but from the hands you once held out in love. Sometimes it's done out of spite, sometimes out of envy, and sometimes simply to win favor in places you never even knew were competing. And in the aftermath, you're left sitting alone, stunned, not just by what they did, but by who did it. There's a special kind of pain that only exists when betrayal comes from someone you once lifted with everything you had. It's not just heartbreak, it's shock. You sit in silence wondering, was it my fault? Did I miss the signs? Did I trust too deeply? And the truth? Sometimes there were no signs. Sometimes your love made you blind to their bitterness. You weren't weak, you were real. You weren't naive. You were honest. You were carrying them through storms while they were secretly studying your cracks. They watched for the soft places in your spirit, not to heal them, but to use them. They didn't just cross boundaries. They studied the blueprint of your life, your heart, your history, and still chose to betray. They took what was sacred and made it strategic. They used what you shared in confidence to create confusion. They turned private pain into public ammunition. Not because you were reckless, but because you were vulnerable. You were generous, and they mistook your openness for opportunity. And that kind of betrayal, it doesn't just hurt you, it changes you. It doesn't just shatter your trust in them, it shakes your trust in everyone. Suddenly, you find yourself closing doors you used to leave open. You stop sharing your dreams. You stop talking about your fears. You stop reaching out, not because you don't want connection, but because you've learned that sometimes the ones you protect are the very ones preparing to harm you. That silence you've slipped into. It's not peace, it's armor, it's survival. It's the kind of silence that whispers, "I'd rather stand alone than be wounded again." And maybe that's where you are right now, remembering how you gave, and they just kept taking. Remembering how you prayed for them while they plotted against your peace. Remembering how you held them up, and they left you to fall. And the worst part, sometimes it feels like no one would even believe your story. A sibling, they'd say, but that's your own flesh and blood. Yes, and that's what makes it cut so deep. But let me speak something into your heart today. Just because they betrayed you doesn't mean you were wrong to love them. Your love was never wasted. Your kindness wasn't foolish. Your open heart was not the problem. Their response was, you don't have to harden to protect yourself. You just have to grow wise. And wisdom says, I can forgive you, but I won't hand you the same access again. Wisdom says, I release the weight of what you did, but I'm also reclaiming the boundaries I never should have let fall. Because forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. Forgiveness is a decision to be free. It is not forgetting. It is not pretending. It is not inviting the same betrayal back through the door with a smile. Forgiveness says, I'm giving this wound to God, not because you deserve mercy, but because I deserve healing. It's placing justice in the hands of the one who sees it all, who knows every unspoken word, who counts every tear, and it's trusting him to restore, in his time, what others tried to destroy. Yes, reconciliation is beautiful, but it's not always safe, it's not always possible, and it is never forced. Some people will never apologize, some will never admit what they did. They'll keep smiling, keep pretending, and you'll be tempted to doubt your own memory, your own heart. But hear me, you don't need their confession to move forward. You just need clarity. Clarity that says what happened was real. It was painful, and it wasn't okay. Clarity that gives you permission to love from a distance, to protect your peace, to no longer hand over the keys to your most sacred places to someone who's proven they can't be trusted with them. Clarity that says family should protect, not exploit. And just because we share a last name doesn't mean you get first access to my life. And if the ache still lingers, if the memory of what was lost still stings in the quiet moments, then know this: God saw it, God knows. God will restore. He will heal every broken space. He will honor your heart. He will bring peace to the places betrayal once ruled. So let them go, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve freedom. You were never created to live in chains. You were born to walk in peace.